All right, well, welcome, folks. We're so glad you're here with us today for this special Earth Day celebration. My name's Marie Von Enken. I'm a program manager at Holistic Management International, and I'm honored to be hosting today's conversation alongside two truly thoughtful and inspiring land stewards, Bluesette Campbell and Don Campbell. First, I'd like to mention that I'm hosting this meeting today from Port Townsend, Washington. As you can see, I'm outside. It's springtime. This is the ancestral home of the Coastal Salish people. Just a quick housekeeping thing. If you are new to Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a menu that looks like this. Over on the left, you'll see the audio and video functions. There you can mute and unmute yourself and turn your video on and off. This speech bubble icon here is the chat box. So if you have any questions that come up during today's presentation, please put them in the chat box. I'll be cataloging those, and then we'll have time for a Q&A at the end of the presentation, and so we'll present those then. As we gather to honor Earth Day, we're reminded that caring for the Earth isn't something we do just once a year. It's in the everyday decisions, the ones that take place on farms, ranches, and in community spaces where real stewardship happens. Holistic management gives us a framework to do just that. It's about making decisions that support healthy soil, thriving ecosystems, strong communities, and a life that's aligned with what we truly value. It helps us work with nature instead of against it, and reminds us to step back, observe, reflect, listen, and adapt with care. To everyone here, thank you. Whether you're managing land, supporting others who do, or just beginning your journey, the work you're doing in regenerative agriculture truly matters. Your care, creativity, and your commitment are shaping a better future, one decision at a time. And we're really excited to hear from Bluesette and Don today as they share how holistic practices continue to shape their choices, their land, and their lives. Before we begin, just a quick reminder that everyone is coming to this presentation from different backgrounds, ecosystems, and experience levels, and we hope that this will be a safe meeting and learning space for everyone to participate. So these are our community agreements, and I'm just going to give you all a few minutes to read them over, and once you have, please type "I agree" in the chat box. Thank you. I should create some background music for this. If you were where I am, you would hear a lot of birds. All right, just a few more seconds. Thank you. All right, well, I am going to hand this over to Bluesette and Don to introduce themselves. And as they're doing that, I also, excuse me, invite you all to share your name, location, and what you do with the land in the chat box.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's exciting to be here with you today. Don and I decided, even though we don't live in the same household, to come to you from my kitchen. So you're seeing the background here. It might look like we're in two separate rooms, but I can assure you we are together. We're excited to talk to you a little bit today about our respect for Earth and how we practice holistic management on our ranch here near Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan in Canada. I guess what I'll do is I'll turn it over to you, Don, to talk a little bit about yourself and the ranch and how you came to holistic management. We're just going to talk a little bit about or introduce ourselves, and then we're going to share a slideshow presentation with some pictures and hopefully a couple of thought-provoking questions and maybe some tools today on as we honor Earth. And so maybe I'll just pass it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Blue. Thank you, Marie, for having me on. I really enjoy these kind of events. And
Thanks for
thank you to all the
coming,
people that
Don.
have, oh, you're welcome. And thank you to all the people that have signed in. It's really interesting. I see some names that I know from Saskatchewan on the call, so that's super. So thanks to you folks too. My journey in holistic management started in 1985. I went to, excuse me, I went to a grazing conference, and there was a speaker there, Jerry Holtman. He was talking about doubling your grass by how you manage your grazings. And I was a 40-year-old rancher that really struck a bell with me. So I just started, I jumped on the bandwagon and away I went, and I'm still going. So that's a quick introduction. We live on the BBRC Ranch. We've now handed the business to the next generation, which will include Lou and her husband and Scott, my son Scott and his wife. So things have done that way. Like I said, I started in 1985, so I've had about 40 years experience managing on our own ranch. The results have been amazing. Like, probably tripled our grass on a set land base, strong, profitable business. And the biggest thing is the growth in our people. And without holistic management, we'd never have our kids at home because we wouldn't have had the people skills of how to get together and work together. We wouldn't have had the money to be able to afford to be here. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I'm looking forward to today. Back to you, Blue.
But yeah, so I think we've been here now 23 years. Does that make, yeah, 23 years that Don's son Mark and we were married in 99, and we've moved back here in 2002. And for those of you who were sort of in this area around that time, I'm sure you remember the years of 02, 03. So there was significant drought and BSE hit. And so there was a lot of shenanigans across the border with the cattle industry. And the introduction to ranching in Canada was different than what I had expected. But I will say that overall, I was very pleasantly surprised because in holistic management, you prioritize the people. And so as things sort of happened, and the birth of my first son was also in that first year, as things happened, the focus was on the people during those very challenging times. So some of those concepts hopefully will come through today. We're a cow-calf operation. We run long yearlings. Most of the time, that means we carry them over until the following fall. This year was an exception. We have also some cross-border shenanigans happening, in case you haven't noticed, with the cattle market and tariffs and everything. So we did ship some of our cattle early this year, so that's a change for us. We live along the river. We have 3 different soil types here, which keeps things interesting, also provides us some flexibility. We generally have a drought plan. We have a flood plan, so we can adapt accordingly. And, we're pretty far north. I don't know, I haven't been able to check the chat box to see where you're from, but I think you're coming from all over the place, which is really nice. So on the brittleness scale for, Alan Savory's brittleness scale, we're about a 4 roughly. So we're not a desert. We're not a rainforest. We're a little bit on the wetter side of the middle. And that means we can grow grass. It's a good place for cattle. And hopefully we can grow cowboys. We're hoping to be able to pass, now that this transfer has happened successfully, that we are hoping to be able to pass this on to the next generation. Yeah, I think with that, maybe we'll get started. What I'm really hoping to do today, we're going to have sort of informal conversation between Don and I around some concepts of holistic management. And we really encourage your questions. So Marie is going to kind of moderate those after our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer questions that you might have. I encourage you to utilize Don's wisdom for this hour and a half, whenever you think of something, especially the big picture, the image of holistic management and how it impacts Earth. I strongly encourage you to ask those questions, and we'll create maybe some conversation between the two of us. So with that, I'd like to share my screen, and let's see. We'll get started. So hopefully you're seeing that, and we'll get rid of the menu. So there we go. So we're coming to you just the day before Earth Day. Maybe it will impact how you think about tomorrow, or how you think about the rest of the 365 days, 4 days of the year. In the holistic management, it's managing the whole. So we're not going to just talk about one aspect today. We're going to focus on the ecological, a little bit on the financial, because we don't want to forget that, and give you a full picture of kind of how we think about holistic management, but also how we might operate on our ranch here in Northwest Saskatchewan. So I wanted to start with the land base, because most people on Earth Day think about the land and the water, you know, the air, the fire, all those things. And so we give you a snapshot. This is looking right outside our kitchen window here. Not right now. This was taken in midsummer during the golden hour. You can see the sun is setting to the west there. This is one of my favorite views on our ranch, but you can see there, it's quite green in this particular picture. There's trees in the background. We're on Treaty 6 territory here, and it has some beautiful river frontage, some sloughs, oxbow lakes, and quite a bit of grass. Don, you took this place over in 72?
72, yeah.
72. And your dad bought it in
48.
48. So we've been around here a while, but in terms of the overall Earth, it's just a speck of dust, a little tiny piece of the calendar. But while we're here, we take pride in stewarding the land. So this land can now produce more than it previously did, because we use the cattle as a tool to help improve the land. So at one point in time, I would say all cowboys figured they raised animals for beef, right? It's for the end game of the steak. And at some point in time, 35 to 40 years ago, you started to shift that thinking into using the animals as a tool. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Like one of the things HM taught us is that animals are a tool. They have two functions. They have to harvest the wealth, which is in the grass, and they have to improve the land. To improve the land means they have to walk, a hoof action, and manure. Two simple things. So we use the animals by stopping the overgrazing, covering the bare ground to grow more grass. And, you know, we've got about 4,200 acres of land here. We've tripled our grass production on that set land base. That's like somebody giving us two 4,200 acre ranches for nothing. And you can imagine you're all in business. What does that do for your bottom line? Makes you very profitable, makes you very resilient. And the interesting thing, it just continues to grow. We've been at this 40 years and it's not leveling off. We know it's going to get better in the next 40 years. So it makes you very, very optimistic.
And so I think a lot of people think about, you know, considering Earth Day, if you think about the land base and the water, and maybe you go to cattle or some other kind of, you know, commodity animal, or maybe even wildlife, you kind of broaden, you know, Earth in a different realm. And so I'd like to expand that even a little bit more. I mean, the way we think about, you know, the health of our ecosystem on the manage or the whole that we manage is through the ecosystem processes. And I'm not here to like teach this today. I just wanted to show you that through this window that we look out in my kitchen window, I don't just see the trees, the grass, and the water and the cattle. Actually, there's a nice herd of young cattle just out in front of us. But I think of it through these windows, these 4 ecosystem processes. So I'm looking at when the sun is coming down, what is it hitting? Is it hitting bare ground, or is it hitting some sort of vegetation, whether it's green or biological litter? You know, what's actually happening to that solar energy? Are we converting it? And I would say right now we're doing a pretty good job of that. We can always improve. And then I also think about if the rain did fall, which it really hasn't much this spring, but when it does fall, how do we capture that and can we use that effectively? So I'm also looking out the window at how effective our water cycle is. The mineral cycle, we've just come through the dormant season where, things were very cold and things are starting to heat up a little bit. We can see the catkins on the poplar trees. That means leaves are coming soon, and that's pretty exciting. And this process of things breaking down, microorganisms chewing things up and creating some really great, topsoil for us, that's about to really get active. And then we also look at diversity. So in our 3-part goal, the third part of our 3-part holistic goal says that, we manage for diversity. That means we're looking for water, we're looking for trees, we're looking for grass and shrubs, and even things like thistle. We don't want a whole bunch of thistle, but we do want very active and healthy ecosystem, which includes successional plants like thistle and dandelion and little some of those undesirable forbs. But as we manage for these ecosystem processes, when they're all in balance, we don't have an abundance of one particular thing. We do have quite a bit of willow here. Do you want to talk a little bit about managing for willow, just like what it's like here?
Sure, I could do that, Lou. Like we're on the floodplain of the river, so we have a lot of willows, a lot of poplars and different kinds of bush. And at one time we thought, if we can get rid of the willows, we'd have more grass. And what we've come to realize is that the willows are part of the cycle. And when it's hot summer day, the willows provide shade, so we have less water lost to evaporation. So actually, when it's a dry year, we'll have more grass in our willow pastures than we will in the open pastures. So if we would have had the money, say 20 years ago, to come in and clear all the ranch, it would have made the ranch worse. It's the diversity that makes it healthy. When you're looking at your land, I'd like to suggest that whatever you see on the land is not good or bad. It's a symptom of previous management. So if you don't like what you see, you don't try to get rid of it, say a thistle or a dandelion or a weed. You change your management so that your grass gets healthier and the forbs disappear. I might just quickly too add a bit about the water cycle. It goes up on the slide there. You can double your effective rainfall. So if you get an inch of rain, everybody knows some runs off, some soaks in. Amount that soaks in, some of that is lost to evaporation. So after the runoff and the evaporation are done, what's left for plant growth is effective rainfall. You can double that. That's just like when your neighbor gets an inch of rain, you get 2 inches. Can you imagine what that's worth? It's just unbelievable. Most places in North America, rain is our limiting factor. We can double it by management. That's huge, and many, many people are choosing not to do that. When you catch on to that, it just changes your whole viewpoint.
Yeah, and we could probably end the webinar right there. There's a bunch of liquid gold, as I like to call it, out of Don's mouth, but we'll keep going. So I just wanted to show what happens to our decision-making here on the ranch when we view our land through those ecosystem processes. This is a picture out in the pasture where we did some winter bale grazing. So this is early in the spring after the frost has come out, and what we're looking for. And so our practices around covering the bare ground, which I'll talk a little bit more about, creates this effect. And I would say a lot of people think that this looks like we killed the vegetation because there's a high or a significant amount of cover, or what most people call waste. I'm going to call it biological capital because it's an investment into the soil bank account there. But what we're looking at is that through our management practices or making the decision to think differently about the land, we might cover the bare ground and turn this type of image into this. So this is in the same place, just a few feet away from where we have done some bale grazing. And this is obviously very thick with clover, some different species. There's some forbs here. So just through thinking about things slightly differently about our land base and looking at those ecosystem processes covering the bare ground and stopping some of the overgrazing with our animal management, we can shift things from one phase to another. It also allows for us to create abundance in all kinds of things, not just plant species, but diversity. I love these two pictures. We have some bald eagles that nest in the same place. We probably have multiple pairs, but these ones nest down by the river year after year, which is really nice. And for those of you who have never seen, I think this is actually a very rare sighting. I think in 2008, we were doing a grass tour and hunkered down in the grass next to his or her parents, was this beautiful baby sandhill crane. And we provide quite a bit of nesting habitat for the cranes. They come and go throughout the year, but I believe some of our practices have led to a very welcoming environment for multiple species. Yeah, and I also wanted to show it doesn't necessarily need to just happen in the pasture. When we do things like this, so this is a picture of my garden. Look at all the diversity. Some people say that looks like a mess or very chaotic, which I would agree. But nature is messy. Earth needs that kind of diversity to create the symbiotic relationships. And so we can take something, like this or this, which is just another image. This is my perennial herb garden. We take that and we create things like this. So looking at the health of the plants, you might not think that this grass species is a welcome species in my garden, but I beg to differ. It's actually one of the things that makes my soil improve. And you can see in this next picture, the garden in the background, what's happening with the grass roots. There's a lot of sugars or carbohydrates coating those root systems, which is feeding the microorganisms. So I've also shifted my way of thinking in the garden, not just in the pasture, but it's the same principles. When we look at it through the ecosystem processes, I covered the bare ground and created an ecosystem where there's lots of healthy microorganisms that change basically what we have here, pure sand, into this dark, rich looking soil. So with that, maybe we'll move on to the next concept. Yeah. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about finances. The reason why I'm talking about finances on our Near Earth Day is that, we can care for the land, but if we're not doing it in a profitable way, or we're constantly pulling things out of the land to increase our yields and focus just on profits, both of those are not sustainable. So I think it's important to kind of mention a few things around the financial arena. And in this area, I'd really like to talk about how we think about finances differently in holistic management that allows us to stay on the land year after year. So I just thought I would ask a few probing questions. This is a traditional mindset in annual financial planning or budgeting, or accounting for profit or loss on a ranch. And I would assume this would be something similar to what you thought previous to
Definitely.
taking, and it's kind of the image of a farmer or rancher like putting all of their receipts into a shoebox and then shoving it across the desk to the accountant and saying, gee, Fred, how did I do this year? And finding out after the fact in a reactive way whether there was a profit or loss for the year. And as we talk about holistic management and thinking about shifting the paradigms of what we previously understood to something new, what I'd like to kind of talk about is perhaps thinking about it in a different way. The HM financial planning has a profit focus or profit forward. If you're a wine guru, you might think of it in a profit forward way. So income minus profit, or paying yourself first, or identifying what you want to happen with your net worth ahead of that, and then deciding from there, how much do we have in order to spend to make the money that we need. And so this is a concept that I think really challenges people, because we're so used to saying, I sell, this product and it cost me this much to do it. And at the end of the year, maybe we did something, or maybe we actually lost something. In this way, 12 months in advance, we can think about how to plan for a profit and decide 12 months ahead of time whether we're satisfied with that or not. And if we're not, we have the power to choose. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we've managed our finances over, how you kind of taught and guided us or led us on the ranch here with finances?
Well, the idea of wanting to make a profit, that's key. And if you can shift your mindset or your paradigm to saying, I don't just want to produce cattle or a heavy calf or whatever. I want to do something that's going to be profitable at the end of the year. And the tradition in holistic management is you take your expenses and divide them in half. So half is the profit and half is to cover your expenses. Now that's really challenging, but it's meant to challenge you, not so much that you do it, but that you're challenged to control your expenses so you actually make the profit. And I taught a course like that one time to an older gentleman, he's about my age. I went back in 6 months and he said, I'm still mad. Only 46% of my income is profit. What should I do? And I said, why don't you celebrate? What was it last year? 2%? Minus 2%? So focusing on profit has just tremendous advantages. And when you can do that, you can spend your money more wisely. It just multiplies. So I really encourage you to think about, you want to be profitable or do you want to be productive? And in agriculture, like agribusiness, extension, universities, all those people are saying, oh, just be more productive. High production and profit are not linked. You got to have low expenses to be profitable.
And I think that that challenge overwhelms a lot of people in managing, especially natural resources, if they're making their living on the land, is to think about how much power and control they have over it. I think it's often easier just to say, well, it didn't rain, therefore, there's a loss. We'll just, we'll do better next year. But there's a real active participation in that, is being able to plan ahead of time. If you do think it's dry, what are some of the things that you might change in your operation? And if you set a profit going forward, you have something to aim for. Shooting for the moon and only making it to outer space is still, a successful expedition. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about what sets holistic management apart in the financial arena, is that not necessarily is a dollar. So we might consider, the previous slide on a profit forward approach as being very different. It's a paradigm shift. If you have forever thought that there is no profit in agriculture, it might be a hard shift to make, that there is profit to be had. Another potential hard shift is to say that not every dollar is equal. And I think one of the concepts that has really strengthened and allowed this operation to, triple its carrying capacity over time is being able to analyze the enterprise of cattle and say, well, what is the weakest link in the chain? And when we do that and focus the expenses on addressing that weak link, then a dollar doesn't equal a dollar, because the dollar over here spent on strengthening your chain is worth much more than this dollar over here. So if we look at the chain link in holistic management, we simplify it down to 3. In every enterprise, you either have a resource conversion weak link, a product conversion weak link, or a marketing weak link. And so that allows our operation to kind of choose which one we're going to prioritize the dollars and strengthen that chain. And then in the next year, hopefully it's improved and we can move on to the next link in the chain. Do you want to talk a little bit about like that in the course of, the last 35 or 40 years and how that's really helped the operation?
Yeah, definitely. Like the weak link idea is so critical. And what we found is that if we can produce more grass, that's where the wealth is. We can have more cattle, we can have more profit. So for several years, we focused on producing the grass. Then we shifted over, went to the product, which is producing the beef, which is actually changing the grass into a product we can sell. We increased our number of pastures, so we increased our stock density. We reduced our grazing days. And then in the end, we came to marketing. So we worked in all 3. if you're paying any attention to your business and you pick the weak link as being a resource, if you focus on that for a few years, it should not be the weak link any longer. The weak link will move. We've had the weak link in all three areas. An example this year, Bluesette mentioned we just sold our yearlings, or quite a few of them. We did that in the first month of the year because we started our year on April the 1st. The cattle sold on April the 6th, whatever it was. So we're focusing, we know by selling today at today's price, we're going to make a profit. We've also reduced the risk of drought because we won't have as many cattle. So whatever grass we grow, we'll be able to get by better. So it just all ties in like it's a whole system. You know, people, the land, and the money. You've got to do all three. And if you don't do all three, it's just a matter of time before you fail. Like if you have the best grass in the world and you don't pay attention to your finances, you won't make it. If you have the best grass and good finances and don't look after your people, you won't make it. So the only possible way to be successful in the long term, which we all want, look after your people, improve the land, and make a profit. I'd encourage you to investigate it.
And so when we think about the ability to analyze your enterprises and think about what is the area that should receive in this particular year the most resources, that allows you to prioritize expenses that you've already planned to make and put them where you're going to get the biggest bang out of it. And I was teaching a course down in southern Saskatchewan, and the operation that had multiple players in it, they decided that resource conversion was their weak link. They wanted to improve the soil health and also grow more grass, so they would have the ability to have, you know, more cattle grazing on that grass. So they were focusing on resource, which had been the weak link, but they had only learned to identify it. And then they realized that their actions over the past year with a resource weak link, that one of the things that the rancher loved to do was go to the auction and get a deal. And so he was going to the auction waiting for the good deal, and he was buying more cattle at really good prices, even though resource was his weak link, because he was thinking about the production. If I just sell more product, I'll be more profitable, without recognizing that the weak link was resource. So in a sense, he was sort of shooting himself in the foot because he was actually making his resource even weaker by purchasing more product. And once he was able to identify, actually what I need to do is focus on my land base. And so he decided to buy some seed. He decided to do some bale grazing to improve that and put a few dollars towards some portable fencing where he could improve his stock density, and then hold off on buying things at the auction until that became the weak link. And so I think it can be a really effective management tool. And when you choose to prioritize, like overall, the weak link will begin to strengthen, and it will rotate over time. If you have a resource conversion weak link for several years and nothing changes, well, then I'd go back to your practices and say, okay, what are we doing? Are we prioritizing dollars in the right place in order to strengthen that weak link? So it's a very good, it's like a magnifying glass of where things need to be improved. And so, as Don alluded to, we can't really leave anything out when you're managing for the whole. Holistic management has a lot of parts and pieces to it. And so we've just talked a little bit about the ecological and the financial, but I think the majority, as we celebrate Earth Day tomorrow, I'd really like to focus on the third and final point of today is around the social, because unless we're caring for people on the land and their ability to to be resilient and to enjoy quality of life and make a profit, so be able to do that for generations, the long-term sustainability just isn't present. So things like conservation and managing or reducing erosion and evaporation, if the people aren't in a good place, that's not going to be high on their list. Caring for the land won't meet the top criteria for making it through a day if the people aren't doing well. So we'd like to spend a little bit of time on the social part of it. And I think maybe we both agree, we kind of preach to the choir a lot around here about how important the people aspect is. But I think there's a real reason for that. Like the tendency for people to want to double their grass is really high. You know, the concepts around regenerative agriculture and things that you can do to create soil armor and get their activity, the biology going in the soil, it's pretty easy to talk about. There are concepts and tools that you can use. Stop the overgrazing with your grazing animals, cover the bare ground, create, you know, good ecosystem processes. Those are fairly straightforward. And people tend to go there because it can be easy to talk about. Improvements in the soil are typically non-emotional, so they're easy to go to. Maybe less so, but still fairly easy, is talking about increasing your finances. And that could be mostly through the lens of production. If you go to the coffee shop, you'll hear, oh yeah, how many, you know, bushels did you take off? How many pounds did your fat cattle weigh? Whatever those metrics are. But, you know, digging down a little bit deeper when you talk about what kind of profit or paying yourself first and analyzing which link of the chain is weakest, it's still fairly easy to talk about. What is more difficult to talk about are these aspects around the social arena, the third, you know, leg of the stool. Because when you double your crop production or the weight of your steer or the amount of grass you produce, if it comes at the detriment of your people and they no longer want to talk to each other, they can't sit down at the kitchen table and plan for, you know, the next year's budget, that's a real problem. And we all know families that have, you know, broken down or places that have been split up because of that. Any story you have there to share?
Well, just quickly, in 1997, Bev and I, that's my wife, we wanted to be on the road and do a little more consulting and less active ranching work. So I hired our son, Scott. He came home. He'd been in the States for a few years working, came home. I hired him to manage the ranch. And he was in charge of everything. I wrote up a contract just like he would with a stranger. To get so much money, so much profit, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that was different about that contract is Scott was to get advice from me when he thought he needed it, not when I thought he needed it. And that was a big jump for me. I'd been a sole proprietor for 30 years, but I thought this is the best way to help my son grow. So we did that, and it was amazing. And the growth in Scott, like buying the cattle, selling them, you know, doing everything. But the biggest change was that I realized I had more influence over Scott because he wasn't afraid to talk to me, because he didn't have to take my advice. Had I been looking over his shoulder and say, well, do this, do that, don't do that, he would have hid things from me and I would have had less influence on him. So you need to help your children grow. There's a saying, it says, give your children roots and wings. And the people side is the most important. I could just go on and on and on, but I won't because we're time limited here. But care for your people and start with yourself. If you're not healthy, you're no good for anybody else. And then just expand the circle.
Yeah, we often talk about the analogy of the oxygen mask. You know, in the plane, you always administer your own mask first. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about, is caring for yourself, caring for your family, caring for the people on the land so that you can double your grass, so that you can plan for a profit. If you're not okay, then that makes it really difficult to do. A couple of ways of caring for your people. So, you know, you can see a couple of ways of doubling your grass and a couple of ways of increasing your profits. Caring for your people is to determine a three-part holistic goal. You know, that allows you to define your values, determine what quality of life you desire and how to achieve that. And if you're able to do that, what impact does that have on your family, your community, and the land over, you know, generations? That kind of guidance or three-part goal can be really effective as you make decisions. So we've been using the goal. We have it's up on my refrigerator here. We've had a three-part goal starting in 2000, actually, a couple of years before we moved here. And that has guided our decision making. You know, we identify things like open communication, you know, being accountable. Those kinds of values come through very, very strongly in our three-part goal, as well as how we manage for, you know, diverse wildlife and moderate tree cover and things like that. So it can be fairly specific to the kind of vision that we have. The other thing around caring for your people is being able to test the decisions that you're making towards the goal, towards the state that you want. And, that 3-part goal can be a really good compass as we think about, do we want to buy more cattle? Do we want to buy more land? Do we want to sell equipment, for example? We'd go back to that 3-part goal and say, actually, this action takes us closer to that goal. So it might be a really good idea. Or conversely, this action actually takes us farther away from our goal. So why would we do that? So it doesn't tell you yes or no. It just prompts you into the questions of, why would we do something that doesn't take us to the vision that we foresee for generations to come? And so I think that's been very helpful in guiding. And personally, I think for the well-being of our family, when we make decisions that go away from our goal, nobody feels really good about that. So the mental health to some degree decreases because you're doing something that doesn't align with who you want to be. And maybe on a big picture, Don, how do you see that in the world today? Like, there seems to be a lot of discontent and division and lack of being in touch with values.
Well, if you look at North America, which I'm most familiar with, and probably most of you are in North America, probably the best place in the world to live. We've got everything. We've got a standard of living. We've got money. Maybe not a lot in agriculture, but money's everywhere. We should be the happiest people on the face of the earth, and we know we're not. So something's missing. And in our life, we had a good life when we went to holistic management, but the holistic management process helped us move from where we were to a better place. And what I would like to say, maybe it's kind of my ending statement here, maybe, is that holistic management works. It doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done. You can have a better life, and you can start today, and holistic management can help you.
Thanks, Don. And we just wanted to show you some pictures of what the social aspect on the B-Bar-C Ranch looks like. It's not to say that being family or working with family is always easy, but it certainly is rewarding. And the real reason why we're on the land here, improving the soil, is it's just one way that we can create a stronger family. The ranch itself is a tool. So, I mean, we could be doing something entirely different. Don is a vet. He could have had a vet practice and still have the same values and ideals and future vision. We just happen to use the ranch as a way to ensure that family. Again, not because it's always easy, but because it is very rewarding. And so in order to achieve the quality of life that we desire, we focus on the people aspect. We check in frequently. If things aren't going well, we'll take some bold statements. Just recently, Scott, my brother-in-law, my husband and I, we decided that, we could make some improvements. And so we sought, professional help. So somebody who could help us improve our communication skills, maybe, find out where the barriers to strong family bonds were happening so we could address them. Again, that's not easy work. Like, nobody was super excited to go, but we all knew it was essential in order to maintain that quality of life that we desire. And so in order to achieve those things, I believe that there are investments, very much like we talked about with the soil and creating the biological capital, the planning that goes into planning for a profit. Those are all things that in a proactive approach. And that happens also with the social sphere. Like, you don't just wake up one day and find out that one of your children wants to be, a rancher. It's investments over time. And this picture to me captures so much about what's going on, on the B-Bar-C 15 years ago, probably this picture was. And that there's a real intentional investment. And I think, Don, you've done an amazing job based on your own experiences of making sure to pass those pieces of wisdom down, but also not get in the way. And one of the things that you've been so gracious in is always saying, like, I can be here as a counsel, but I'm not here to tell you, what to do. Do you want to share your story about do what you think is best? I believe in you.
Well,
those are strong words.
That's a statement that's been with me a long time. And when I took over from my dad, I just very quickly. I came home with my two brothers. It didn't work. Both of them left. My dad and I were here alone. And he gave me complete free rein to run the ranch the way I wanted, even though it was his ranch and all his money was tied up in it. And one of the things I did quite early on is I sold all our cows and I bought yearling cattle. And I went to my dad and said, "This is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think?" And he said, "Do what you think is best. I believe in you." Now, he not only gave me the free rein, but he gave me the state of mind and the confidence that I could be successful. And then when I was, changing a lot of things, like we were early into holistic management, so we changed a lot of things. We sold our haying equipment. We started buying hay. We bought yearlings. We sold our cows, et cetera, et cetera. And when I would get worried about it, I turned to Bev and she would say, "Do what you think is best. I believe in you." And like I see myself as being 6 foot tall and bulletproof. When I turn to Bev, she's a wonderful wife and a great woman, but she thinks I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof. What's holding me back? Nothing holds me back. The only thing between me and a more successful life is me, and I can change me. And I would suggest if you look at your life, you'll find the same thing. Sky's the limit. Go for it. It's achievable.
Yeah. And so this investment in people, it's such a, I mean, I certainly have felt that over the last 20, 25 years is, you walk your talk, Don. You say you believe in us and you mean it, which is very inspiring. A little bit scary, going to be totally honest, a little bit scary, but it allows, it's those wings that you talk about, room to grow. And my next picture is one of my favorite. This is my youngest son, Birch. The previous slide was my oldest son, Andrew. This image captures so much. One of the things that I wanted to talk about it, his face says it all. He's learning how to hunt muskrats and, how to track animals and do all those things. And the fact that his dad had the time, took the time, or created the time to share this idea with Birch and to learn about, where these animals live, their behaviors, how to hunt for them, what to do with them after you've hunted, created such an interest in the land for Birch that he's the one who's very interested in potentially taking over the place. But this investment started at such a young age. And my husband used to say, taking your kids when it's really inconvenient is the investment so that when you take them later, they know how to help. And that it isn't really helpful when they're at this age, but when they turn 14, 15, and 16, they want to because they know how to, and you've built that confidence in them at a very young age. So those early investments have compound interest effects later on. Also investing in your community. So it isn't just about the children, but the social aspect. We have multiple grass tours, not necessarily every year, but almost one a year, where we invite people from our community to come. And part of that is in sharing the concepts. We know that they've been very successful for us, and we'd like to share that with others, that when we practice or stay in the holistic management practice, that we find a lot of success there. And so we like to share that with others, not because they have to, but if they want to, there are some tools there to employ. But this is also an investment in our community. If we're experiencing success, why not share? If we hold it as sort of the Campbell secret, then, it's not really doing Earth any good. But also there's a vulnerability factor to this. When we invite there, I think there were 80 people this particular tour. It happened to be a pretty dry year. And, there's always a chance for somebody to pass judgment on what we're doing. I think that's one of the things that you had to break through 40 years ago, was that doing things differently wasn't necessarily that easy to do. And so, putting yourselves out there and sharing the practices can give back also in compound interest. Many of these folks here are part of a management club, so that when we have really hard decisions to make, we can turn to these people who know what our vision is. They can hold us accountable to the kinds of land stewards that we want to be. But it takes a little bit of investment early on, a proactive approach is that with that. How did you find people to help hold you accountable and support you, and especially in the early years?
Well, Blue just mentioned the management clubs, and I was fortunate I belonged to what was called the Devon Club, and most of us took the course together. We came back to Lloydminster area, which 2 hours drive for us. Most of the other people within a half an hour of Lloydminster. We decided we'd set up a management club. That club met monthly for about 27 years. And you just imagine the support and encouragement. People come to your place, they want you to be successful. They see it more objectively than you do because they're not emotionally involved. And when you go to their place, the reverse happens. And that was such a big part of our success because in the early days, holistic management was shunned by everybody. And we said, we don't care. It's working for us. Let's go ahead. And we had that support group, which is absolutely critical. So I would really encourage you to, invest in a management club if you can.
Yeah, find your people.
Good people.
Yeah, and not people who just think exactly like you, people who think maybe are like-minded, but also have the tenacity to challenge you at the same time, because that's how we learn. And those are your people. It's finding those. And it can be more challenging. We didn't have an active management club here in 2010 and 11, and Mark and I knew that that's a piece of what we wanted, is a support network. And so we asked Don to teach a course in our area, and we invited several of the ranchers around who come for brandings and help us out, so they knew who we were. And yeah, I can say those guys have been, now it's going into our 13th year here of an active management club, and they've been paramount in supporting us through things like floods and droughts and some family challenges. So it's been integral to our success. So when things like this happen, it's not always a bowl of cherries. And this is out in our meadows. There isn't supposed to be any water here. And this is actually a shallow portion of the flooding that we experienced in 2020. This is my brother-in-law, Scott. We're rescuing some young, freshly born calves. This happened in June. So we had fresh calves on the ground and trying to get the cattle to higher ground safely. But what I want you to notice is his facial expression. It is not, it was a difficult time. Don't get me wrong. We had a lot of stress related to this, but we had support. And I think that's the element that we relied on during very challenging times. We were reaching out to our management club. We were meeting here frequently, sometimes, multiple times a day, to figure out what our next moves were, to create a new grazing plan, to create a financial plan. That following year, we spent a lot of time invested in our finances. And so, the investments or the proactive approach pays dividends well into very difficult times. And it's just really hard in those moments, like in the middle of the flood, to try to develop those relationships quickly so that you have them during a difficult time. That can be really challenging. So again, another proactive approach on the social end. So as we sort of wrap up, I just thought I would give a little bit of a glimpse into some tools that could help as you develop your social circles or your spheres of support, or just in your own family unit, or perhaps just in your own mind, shifting. I think it's a natural tendency for humans to want to, to resist change because it's a little bit scary. One of my mentors, David Irvin, who's a good friend of yours, shared this on a cocktail napkin with me a long time ago. We were speaking at the same conference, and I came to him with the challenges of being a parent of a child with autism. And I just told him how much I was struggling, that I felt inadequate to be a parent of a child with autism. I didn't know what I was doing. There was no textbook. And he said, "Oh, let me just draw this. Maybe it'll help you understand where you are." And so he drew this squiggly line. Doesn't really matter what the shape is. It's the trajectory. And he said, "This is where you are now." And this change happened when you got the diagnosis. And so, of course, the predictability from what you once knew now changed into chaos because you can't predict what's going to happen. But if you hold on, something else is in store for you. But human tendency is to want to go back to what was normal. And if we do that, which most people want to do, you get stuck in a bit of a cycle. But if you hang on and you make it through this, what I call a chasm or a crevasse, you can see what happens on the other side. This pit here seems like the pit of despair, if you will, can be dark and difficult to make it through. But what David challenged me was to say, if you embrace this change, then what happens on the other side is that you create a new level of understanding and you have new resilience to make it through to what this new status quo is. And so what's ironic about this is that it's human nature to want to get stuck in that cycle. And yet what we yearn for is over here on the other side. And so it's one of those things that when we can embrace the change, it's actually the incremental or the essential piece to moving forward. And this has been really helpful for me. So when things happen in life, like US tariffs, for example, and this feels very chaotic, you don't know what's going to, happen, is to take some time, just wait, have a meeting, think about markets, do a gross profit, find out what's profitable, decide here that actually maybe we just need to collect our thoughts, choose a profitability margin, sell our cattle, and whoof, man, there's some relief on the other side. So it's just a tool, just kind of reflect on where you might be in the process of change, to give yourself permission to just hold on, ride out this roller coaster, and perhaps reach a new level of understanding. So I hope that that's somewhat helpful, and I hope we're getting the point across that in caring for Earth on Earth Day or the other 364 days of the year, is that essentially caring for your people is doing that, because when we're okay, then we can care for the land. The idea about the work around caring for your people, it's been out there for centuries, but the awareness that there's tools to help you is pretty low, especially in the field of agriculture. And so that's where I find the majority of my work. And I think you spend a lot of time teaching courses around people.
People, like what I found when I taught, is the men came, they wanted to grow more grass. And the women came because they wanted a better quality of life. They wanted a little time off, time for family, et cetera, et cetera. And in our own operation, in my own life, the people has been the most difficult part and the weakest part. So if you got a three-legged stool and your finances are good and resource conversion, growing grass is good, you need to strengthen the people, because people will make it successful. The other things are just tools.
Yeah, and in that way, you could also look at the links in the chain as people, land, and finance, or legs of the stool. But you can prioritize caring for your people in a year so that you have the capacity to plan for a profit and care for the land. So I would say increasing your awareness could be very helpful, because that overall is quite low. This kind of work, focusing on people, as I mentioned, like our team, Scott and Mark and I went to a family counselor in January. It was a lot of energy. I think all of us would have preferred to be, vaccinating cows in the freezing, -3 degrees Celsius weather. But we knew it was essential. And so it requires a lot more effort and energy to do, which almost tells me that's why it's so important, and why most people avoid it, is because it can be hard. It doesn't have to be that hard. It gets easier with time. But I think the main message is not to forget about the people. It's easy to sweep it under the rug. And so with that, I think we'll kind of wrap up. I hope we've given you some, things to think about, maybe some paradigms to challenge of your own, and a few tools maybe to help you do that. And, we've been on for about an hour. I think Don and I would both really like to hear some questions from the group. about, where you see things, maybe on a big scale, global, or on a local scale. And we'd be happy to answer, any of those questions. Here's some contact information. If you want to reach either one of us, or you have questions that come to you afterwards, you feel free to reach out and, contact us. This is the QR code for our Facebook page. We don't have a full-time marketer, but, on occasion we post. So if you're interested in finding out what's going on up here, you can find us through the QR code. And yeah, I think with that, maybe we'll leave like 20 to 25 minutes for questions.
Perfect.
And I'll
Thank you
pass it back
so
to you.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know I think I've muted everyone, so you probably can't hear any snaps or claps. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. All right, so we're going to transition over to a short Q&A. If you have any questions for Don or Bluesette, please put them in the chat box. We would love to hear from you. Take a moment to do that, and I will start going through those and sharing them. Great, I see some folks typing. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great. I think we've got a good group. That chat box is probably where we need to keep these. I don't know if y'all can tell, but the sun has come out since this webinar started, and I am so grateful. I'm trying to encourage myself to spend the entire week working from my outside table. We'll see how that goes to celebrate Earth Day. All right, I see one question here. Any specific books that have deeply influenced your thinking?
Do you want to start?
Sure. Like I'm a believer, so I would put the Bible at the top of the list. And then under that, I might put Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, had a big impact on how to manage your people, how to manage yourself. Another book, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychiatrist that was in the Jewish internment camp in Germany. And, he developed some really great ideas. And one of the things I would say, like, if you want to become a better person, associate with good people, because as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And if you surround yourself with good people, it'll rub off and you'll just become better. And you'll help them become better also. Lou?
Yeah, I think just reading in general is a really good idea, because even if you read things that go against who you really are and your values, you get pretty clear, like, yeah, no, definitely not. So picking up, being curious about reading or listening to books or even podcasts, I think are very helpful. I use guidance from David Irvin quite a bit. He has a couple of books, Simple Living in a Complex World and The Other Everest, which have been very helpful. And I think what even helps me more is when I read a book and then I share those thoughts with others. And so again, even if it's not something that I'm truly passionate about, as soon as I ask somebody else about it, I learn something even more. So just the active reading or listening to books and then having conversation afterwards, I think is very helpful.
Thank you. Okay, let me see. A couple more have come into the chat. Do you find that holistic management gives people the permission to put quality of life in the equation of management?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, if you think about any other business, human resources is a part of management. For whatever reason, in agriculture, we've sort of just dropped that off at the gate. And I think so it really deserves, just like land, just like, people, animal health, it should be high up there. The reason why I talk so much about it is it's one of the first things to go, or one of the first things to be forgotten. And so it's kind of bringing that back into balance to say, hey, wait a minute. If if you're not living your values, or you're not enjoying life, like that's where the work starts. If you're just working on the ranch that was passed down from your grandpappy to your pappy and to you, and you really don't want to be there, like, who's holding you back? I think, Don, you mentioned it before. It's like you're standing in your own way. That's nobody's fault but your own, which sounds bad, but actually what that does is it puts you in the driver's seat to say, I'm the only one that can do anything about it. And therefore, I have everything I need in order to do something about that. So, what do you think?
Well, I would say definitely that holistic management brings quality of life into the fore, because we use the example of a three-legged milking stool, and you got to have three strong legs. And, people want to have a good life. Some of our basic needs is to love and to be loved. And holistic management says, bring that quality of life in, improve your communication, grow yourself as a person. When you grow as a person, like when I first went to my first course, there was a little sign on the wall that said, the only person you can change is yourself. And I thought, well, why did I come here? I'm already pretty nice. I want Bev and the kids to shape up. But Bev and the kids never shaped up. But when I changed and I grew as a person and became better, they all moved up with me. And our total life became better. Our marriage became stronger. Our family became stronger. Our business became stronger. Without the people, it's impossible to succeed. And holistic management, I think one of the hardest things for a lot of people is to have balance in your life. And using holistic management with your goal and all the processes that we have, you can achieve balance. You can say, yes, I need to have a holiday. I taught a course to a fellow one time, and he said, I'm going to prove this doesn't work. I've never had a farm holiday in the summertime. I'm going to put it in my goal. And the next year, they went on a family holiday, and he couldn't believe it. He thought, we can't do this. We're farmers. So, care for your people. Most important thing you can do.
I know who that is. So, what advice do you have for bringing the younger generation into holistic farming and ranching, both those that are from ag families, but also those who don't have that background? And how can HM help to get more young people involved in farming and ranching?
I could maybe take a run at that. I would say involve your kids, whatever age they are, at the level they're at. And when we get into holistic management, our kids were maybe 6 to 10 years old, something like that. And we involved them at their level. So we didn't make it complicated, we made it simple. And we'd have them say, well, what do you think is important to you? And they'd write on a piece of paper, we check those papers and look at them, and then we'd have a meeting next week or next month, we'd do it again. And an idea came up, then it became important to our family. And Blue mentioned earlier about taking kids out to help you when they're in the way. When you do that, then when they're actually able to help, they'll say, yeah, I want to help. I feel important. I'm part of the operation. So communication, again, is key. Off-farm children, I don't have as much advice about, but the same thing, it's communication. And, showing them the value of agriculture. There's a slide I used to use when I taught. It said that agriculture is the foundation of civilization. And most of us don't think that. And the people in the city certainly don't think that. If agriculture went broke, destroyed the land, which is done 25 or 26 times in past history, civilization would die. So we're extremely important. If you got a son or a daughter who wants to be a brain surgeon, great. One who wants to be a janitor, great. One who wants to be in agriculture, thank goodness, that was the best pick of all.
I would also add that children have a sense of wonder that we teach out of them. So catching them at a young age and getting them curious about, watching a caterpillar walk across the sidewalk even is an opportunity to talk about diversity and change and, all nature in general. But getting them connected to and curious about their food systems is a really good way to start when they don't have that background. If they're older, I still believe that curiosity exists, but it's got to be a safe place for them to get curious about that. And I think also, I think back to when Bert was 8. So my youngest son was 8 or 7 actually, and he wanted to be in chickens. And we thought, well, it's just a phase, he'll grow out of it. But, 6 months to a year later, he's still asking for chickens. And so we took it as an opportunity. Well, let's create an entrepreneur here and start talking about gross profits. And, if an 8-year-old can understand them, certainly the rest of us in agriculture can have a pretty good grasp on income minus direct expenses equals, X amount of dollars that I can use for my overheads, period. And so you start where they're at. And, he had that business for almost 8 years when he passed it back off to mom and dad and said, yep, moving on. But it was, a really great chance for him to learn.
I love that. I hope all of us can understand gross profit analysis.
His egg business, by the way, was called Eggs Benefit, which I thought was hilarious.
Eggs benefit. We love it. Okay, another one from Kathy Lynn. I'm wondering about using HM for making decisions in a community-based situation, like a community garden. Is it possible, and do you have experience with it?
Do you mind if I take that one?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been working as a certified educator. I've been working and branching out into non-agricultural organizations and communities. The concepts of holistic management, as written, in the textbook by Allen, can be used. It's effective decision making, so it doesn't matter. All of us make decisions, and so I've been working with some organizations in setting a goal. So vision and mission is part of it, but a little bit, digging a little bit deeper into that. Helping them with finances, so focusing on, even if it's a nonprofit, you still need money to operate. So planning for whatever profit you need in order to continue, or building reserves so that you can sustain during difficult years. And then also how the people work. And that is where it's been so helpful, is the human dynamic. And so absolutely. In a community garden setting, I think how you're going to get people in, as Don mentioned, most people are in it for doubling their grass. So if you think about the things that people are interested in, about not working so hard, not pulling weeds, getting better yields, not, all those things, not having to use pesticides and things like that. If your goal is very clear, then you can start to make decisions towards that goal. And I found that to be very effective. In the other arena, so last winter I worked with Hockey Saskatchewan in some of their policy work. They were making policies that didn't actually take them towards their overall vision and mission. And they recognized through the work that actually they needed to go back to the policy board, or chalkboard, and draft policies that actually created the future vision that they desired. So absolutely. Thanks for the question, Kathy.
Yeah, great one. This one's for Dawn. What is your process when you make a big decision, such as when you decided to sell your dad's main herd and got yearlings?
Biggest part, I guess there's two parts to it. One is your goal. Does it fit your goal? If it doesn't fit your goal, it's off page. If it fits your goal, the next one is to do the financial planning behind it. So when I sold the cows, we said, okay, this is going to generate so much money. I'm going to buy so many cattle. It's going to work out this way. And I did a lot of planning. I didn't just do one scenario, I did several scenarios, like high prices, low prices, medium prices. And then when I did enough and I was confident, I said, well, why won't this work? And one of the things I could share maybe is that when I was buying those cattle, I was borrowing over $1 million. That was back in the mid 80s. That was a lot of money back then. And I went to the bank and I didn't have a lot of security, but I had a really solid plan. And it was amazing how the banker just said, oh, you want $1 million? Here. You need more next year? Here. There was no questions from the banker because my planning was so well done. And that gave me confidence, and it made the bank buy into my business and also put my interest rate down. So if you do good books, you find your bankers very easy to deal with. And we found out from many, many people that we've taught, when they go to their bank, and the bank says, wow, you want more money this year? And usually the banker's saying, well, we're going to cut you back. You had a bad year last year. That never comes up. We moved our loan from over $1 million to zero. And anywhere in between, depending what we needed to fit us. And the bank always said, yes, that's a good position to be in.
Yeah, Marie, and I see there's another financial question there. Should we address
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this one was from Ken. When you were starting with the financial part of HM, what figures did you use for your income?
Okay, well, I could jump in on that one. Basically, say if you're on a calendar year, in our case, we sell long yearlings, so we sell our cattle in September. We'd look ahead and get the futures price, best estimate of what the price is going to be, what the weight of the cattle. You put that in. Then you start. And you do these financial plans, you're monitoring it monthly. So you have 12 chances during the year to say, am I still on track? Am I still going to make the profit that I wanted to make? So it isn't hard. Another thing it really helps is there's a lot more confidence in planning as a group. And we taught a group in western Saskatchewan, East Saskatchewan in 2003. And that group has been coming together every year since then, so about 23 years. And they do their financial plan as a group of 8 or 10 people. That's a tremendous motivator because you look at the price and say, well, I don't know where it's going to be. And the neighbor says, well, I think it'll be $2. And the next guy says it'll be $1.80. And it gives you the confidence to pick a price that you're comfortable with. So don't be intimidated. Like, you're powerful. Every one of us is a very powerful individual. We can achieve great things. We use the proper tools to live our dream.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, in terms of the income, it's thinking about whatever dollars come into your operation or your household, or, if you're an individual, thinking about those sources of income and being as specific as you can about what those might bring in. So if it's a commodity, using forecasts, using people to, find an average that you feel confident with, or maybe being a little bit conservative on that. And then when you go to plan your expenses, you do it in the same way, but that you start with the income. I think it's a human nature to want to talk about what it costs us first. And I think what you do is you block out possibility. So thinking about income, planning that first, thinking about the expenses is maybe being generous on that side, not unrealistic, but bolstering what fuel is going to cost, like, for example, or what hay or feed is going to cost, for example. And so you're conservative on one end and slightly generous on the other, and that leaves you a pretty a lot of wiggle room, or some wiggle room in there. I think also, in thinking about planning, is that people tend to think there's so much uncertainty, there's no point in planning. And I know that you've addressed that in multiple courses that you've taught. When challenged, where people get overwhelmed and they don't know where to start the planning, you often say, failing to plan is like planning to fail. Every plan that you make is the best plan at the time. And then when you learn something new, you can create a new plan. And so the more times you're planning, the more adaptive you are in your practice. And I think that's honestly one of the contributing factors to our success here, is being able to pivot. If you don't know where you are, it's hard to know what direction to pivot to. So using a plan as a base point, even if you're off in your first year, if you over project your income or under project your expenses, or vice versa, you have a starting point. And so you can compare budget to actuals. Your next plan is going to be fine tuning and getting even more specific. So you can say, this is where we're pivoting to.
Mm-hmm. So I have, if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat. But in the meantime, I just want to read a couple of these out. One says, just thank you so much for your presentation. We do appreciate our Canadian friends to the north and appreciate the refresher on planning profit and focusing on your weak link. It's a big one. And not a question, just a tremendous amount of gratitude to each of you. Thank you for sharing your experiences and wisdom. You are greatly appreciated.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I can't tell you the the type of community that HM has created. I feel more optimism in the world, as there's chaos sort of around us. It helps me keep it in perspective, because I know that there are people who are forward thinking, who are optimistic, who are wanting to do better, making decisions towards their own goal and context. And that provides a lot of comfort for me.
Pass.
Okay, I see another one come in and this is a good closing one unless other folks have questions. If you could send one message to the world this Earth Day, what would it be?
Okay, I could jump into that one. I'm going to suggest that well, basically since the end of the Second World War, 75 or 80 years, our goal in North America has been to improve our standard of living. And we've done masterful. We've achieved that over and over and over. But where we've suffered and where we haven't done well is in the bigger pictures. Things like marriages, relationships, child abuse, spousal abuse, all those things we're doing a terrible job. Crime, drugs, alcohol. So we've been chasing what I would say is the wrong God. Our God has been standard of living. And I think as a society, we could change and we could chase quality of life. And I'm going to define quality of life like standard living. I don't have to define. We all know that. You know, so another half ton or a Dodge Dually diesel or whatever you want to name. That's quality. And the ads tell us if you have that, you'll be happy. That's a lie. If you're grumpy and you have that, you'll just be grumpy and have a new truck. Won't make any difference at all. But if we pursued quality of life, and I'm going to define my quality of life as I'm speaking, how do I feel about myself in the morning when I'm shaving? How are relationships with the key people in my life, like Bev? And how's my relationship with God? And if those three are good, I'll be happy over a wide range of standard of living. And if they're not good, then I win $1 million, it won't make any difference at all. And I believe we can do better as a society because what we have today, there's too much polarization, there's too much animosity, there's too much hatred. That's all been created by us as people, and we could create something better. And I strongly believe we can and we will.
Thanks, Don. I think my message would be similar in some ways. I like to challenge people to consider who's driving their bus. Is it you or is somebody else doing that? And so I have conversations on more in depth with people. Not to say that asking about the weather, how's your day going, are not good places to start. But I feel like if we really want to make an impact, we can't just have superficial conversations anymore. Choosing the time and place, of course, but having more meaningful conversations, even with people that you don't know. So standing in line at the grocery store, if there's an opportunity to go a little bit deeper and say, how really is your day going? If you hear a fine or it's okay, maybe there isn't further conversation, but sometimes people invite you in, and those deeper conversations are what really holds the world together. And that's how I think overall we're going to care for the land better, is when we care for each other better. And instead of somebody cutting me off at the gas station, trying to get in faster than I do, I can have a little compassion and say there's probably something going on in their world. There must be pain there or something. I can just wait. I can be patient. And so that's one of the things is considering having more meaningful conversations. And the other piece is getting connected to your food. And that can happen at any age and any level, because as soon as we have people who are thinking about how the blueberry was raised, or how the chicken was raised, or if it's not chicken but it's called chicken, how that was created, those kinds of questions are where the learning happens. And so on Earth Day, I would just challenge people to really think about, when you put something in your mouth to nourish your body, where does it come from, and is that the most sustainable source of nourishment I can put in my body? So
Great answers. We've had a number of messages in the chat for thanks again. And I also just want to say that it's been a real gift to pause and reflect together on what it means to care for the land and stay rooted in our values, and to navigate complexity with intention. I think that's the thing that I always hope for on Earth Day, because it is such a complex thing to navigate and a beautiful thing. And holistic management reminds us that the health of our ecosystems and communities and lives are all interconnected. And of course, that every decision we make has the potential to move us towards greater balance, resilience, and regeneration in the land and in our own lives and communities. So to everyone here, thank you again for the incredible work that you're doing, whether you're stewarding the land directly or supporting others who do, or as Bluesette said, if you're an eater, thank you. Your efforts are building a more just, healthy, and hopeful future. If today's conversation sparked something in you, we invite you to stay connected. I know Bluesette put up their contact information. I'll be sending out a follow-up email with their contact information, a copy of these slides, and also a 20% off coupon code for our future courses at Holistic Management International. So we do invite you to stay connected through our courses, our community, and the ongoing work of learning and growing together. And I really hope that you enjoy your Earth Day, whether that means getting your hands in the soil, petting an animal, taking a walk, or simply pausing to look out the window and notice the land around you. I hope you are away from screens tomorrow. I hope that us hosting this today was helpful to make that possible. I definitely am gonna try not to be on a screen tomorrow, but thank you again, Bluesette and Don, for sharing your time and stories and wisdom with us, and to all of you for sharing your time. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Don, do you want to leave us with something? I see you raising a hand.
Just to thank you. It was a privilege and an honor to be with you all. God bless each one that's on the call.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.